Our next speaker is Justin Kringstad, and you've heard a bit from our other speakers about this interaction between the natural gas pipelines and the natural gas system and our electric generation system as a reliability backbone that we need for our ongoing energy transition. Justin is the executive director of the North Dakota Pipeline Authority. In August 2008, Justin was appointed by the North Dakota Industrial Commission as director of the North Dakota Pipeline Authority. A proud, lifelong North Dakotan, Justin earned his degree in geological engineering from the University of North Dakota. Prior to his time with the Pipeline Authority, Justin worked with the North Dakota Oil and Gas Division, the Energy and Environmental Research Center, the North Dakota Geological Survey, and Terra Resources. Justin resides in Bismarck, North Dakota with his wife Katie and 3 daughters. Justin, are you there?
I am. Thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you just fine.
Wonderful.
I'll give you the floor.
All right. So we'll have the IT team, if they can queue up some slides, that would be phenomenal. And as we get started here, that bio could probably be shortened up by just a simple, Justin's an energy and geology nerd. And so it's been quite a wild ride here the last 17 years working in the oil and gas sector in North Dakota, rising from far down the list to becoming the number 2 oil producing state and the number 1 oil producing country in the nation. And so it's come with a lot of challenges, a lot of lessons learned. And so before we get kicked off here, the Pipeline Authority, just very quickly for folks that haven't met me or are not familiar with the organization. So the North Dakota Pipeline Authority is a state government agency under the North Dakota Industrial Commission. So in North Dakota, our Industrial Commission is the governor, attorney general, and ag commissioners. Those 3 make up the Industrial Commission as well as make up the official of the Pipeline Authority. And so the Pipeline Authority is a bit unique in that it's 100% non-regulatory. And so we do not have any say over how pipelines are constructed, where they're constructed, what type of operational practices. So my role on a day-to-day is working with the industry to develop new projects, understand the long-term needs for the region as we continue to grow and expand oil and gas development in western North Dakota, work with companies to find markets, find solutions to address those growing volumes. And so that's the premise that I'll be coming to here today. So to be able to see the slides, I can't see them on my side, but I'm going to assume that they are up in the room. And so we can go to slide 2, please. If they're not up in the room, someone stop me. It'll be pretty important here as we're moving forward. So,
Justin, we do have your slides up, and I think we are on slide 2 right now.
Okay, excellent. So when we look at the U.S., I'm going to start with a very high-level view. We're going to step back, take a look at what's happening at a national level, and then start working back to the supply, and then how do we manage that supply and get moved to emerging markets or markets that have a demand for more of this energy resource. And so on this map, what you're looking at is all the states are colored by whether or not they're a net producer or a net consumer of natural gas. And you'll see the 2 states, North Dakota, Minnesota, on the 2 opposite sides of the equation. North Dakota, we are a net exporter of natural gas. Our natural gas, as you'll learn here in a moment, it's tied to our oil production. If you go to slide 3, on slide 3, you'll see this is where our activity is concentrated today to develop that oil and natural gas resource. Many of you have heard of the Bakken or the Three Forks of Bakken. And the Three Forks are layers within the Williston Basin. So more appropriately, when you look at western North Dakota, the proper term would be called Williston Basin. And within that layer cake geology, you're going to have a number of different formations. On slide 4, this is where the concentration of oil and gas production has been focused between those 2 formations. And so this is on those maps, the western 1/3 of the state. And on the far right of this graphic, what you're looking at is just some of the geology there. And so this is a 360 million year old resource that at that time, 360 million years ago, North Dakota was underwater. Minnesota at that time was above sea level. And so we had this marine environment where the little critters were, the algae and phytoplankton were absorbing energy from the sun, dying, settling in that marine sediment, getting trapped and buried and compressed over time, eventually turning into this oil and gas resource that we have today. And so on slide 5, what you're looking at on the left-hand side, if I was to take the Bakken rock resource that's been cored from 10,000 feet below the surface, hand it around the room, all of you would look at that. If you hadn't seen that rock resource, you'd say, Justin, you're crazy. This looks like really dense concrete. There is no oil and gas trapped in there. And what you're looking at in that middle portion, if you got a high-powered microscope and you looked at the Bakken Three Forks resource, you would see these tiny microscopic pores where that oil and natural gas is trapped down in that resource. And then just for scale on that right-hand side, to scale with that pore space is a human hair. And so a lot of misconceptions about North Dakota and that we're sitting on this underground lake or this underground pool of oil, when in reality, all the oil and natural gas produced from the Bakken Three Forks is coming from these tiny, my mind can't even wrap it around the numbers of these little pores. And then that hydraulic fracturing process, you can see the little micro fractures in that image. That hydraulic fracturing process then is opening up those essentially little roadways to those pores to allow that oil and gas resource to come up to the surface for consumption. You'll see the numbers there, anywhere between 400 and 900 billion barrels of oil we believe are held within that rock resource. And then I just put some fun numbers down there below, about 130 to 290 Lake Minnetonka. Was with my quick and dirty math yesterday on that. So that resource, and when we think about think about that oil underground like a brand new Diet Coke in a 20-ounce bottle. When you look at that 20-ounce bottle of Diet Coke, you just see a brown liquid. As soon as you start releasing the pressure, you start opening the top of the bottle of that Diet Coke, what happens? You release the pressure within that vessel, and all of a sudden bubbles start coming out. And so under pressure, trapped in that Diet Coke is the CO2, that gas stream is trapped within the liquid. The same happens with our crude oil in western North Dakota. Underground, it's under pressure, but as you bring it to surface, that pressure gets released, and all of a sudden that natural gas has been entrained in that liquid, starts to come out. And so we found ourselves in North Dakota in this challenge where economically the driver has always been the oil resource, but you can't produce the oil. You can't take a drink of that Diet Coke and not get the fizz and not get the bubbles. You can't produce a Bakken barrel of oil and not get the natural gas that comes up with it. And so that has been one of the biggest challenges, making sure the infrastructure is in place to handle growing volumes. And so if you go to slide 6 now, these are some of my forecasts going forward. So what we're looking at. And you've got our oil production on the top section of that graphic. And then the very bottom, the third, is our natural gas production outlook. And so even though we see largely flatter oil trends going forward, because of the pressure mechanisms, you're drawing down pressure in that reservoir, more Diet Cokes under the surface are being opened and cracked open. And even if that liquid's not coming, the natural gas is coming to the surface. And so we have this ratio, what we call our gas oil ratio. That's that middle graphic. It's been rising, and we expect it to continue to rise over time. So we need natural gas solutions in North Dakota. So there's a very direct motivation for the state, obviously the oil and gas tax revenues. If there's any type of constraints to that energy development, it immediately impacts the citizens in North Dakota through the tax revenues that resource provides. And so on slide 7, then, what we'll take a look at is coming up with a complete natural gas solution. And in the early days, one of the biggest challenges, we didn't understand the production. We had no concept of how much natural gas is going to be entrained in that oil and coming to the surface. The next challenges were localized on the gathering side. That many of you have likely seen images either from space or from driving through western North Dakota, the natural gas flaring. We're very proud that has come down from 30+% flaring now to, I think last month we were down to 4% flaring. So we're largely getting the gas either collected or throttled back from the wells until a time when the natural gas solution comes into play. and you've got the processing. And then what I really want to focus on today is the last piece of that supply chain, which is transmission. And that is the one that has the longest lead time, some of the highest infrastructure costs associated with it, and quite frankly, probably one of the most challenging. We can control gathering, we can control the processing at the state level. Typically on these transmission, we're talking about interstate systems, FERC regulated, so they're going through a much lengthier process. And if you don't have line of sight on the transmission side, you can't go back, and there's really no need to invest in process and invest in gathering. If you don't have that last piece of the supply chain, all the processing in the world, all the gathering in the world is for naught, because you need that last piece of this equation in order to fully solve the gas situation. So on slide 8, what you're looking at is just a very quick kind of regional view. I apologize that this one I cut off. Typically, I'm speaking to a North Dakota audience, but we'll catch most of what's included there in your region. And so these are our major systems. You've got all the gas processing plants over in the west. Those are the little black icons that you see on the map. And then the pipeline systems. Maybe a little bit more helpful would be on slide 9, which is that same map, but now I've scaled the pipelines by the amount of capacity, the amount of natural gas that they can move. And so you'll see, again, we've got several large systems. North Dakota is incredibly reliant on that yellow system, the Northern Border Pipeline. That's currently our largest system. Lesser degree reliance on the Alliance Pipeline. And then you'll see over in your neck of the woods, the Viking system, which carries about 500 million cubic feet of gas per day. And then to the north of you, the Great Lakes system. And map was to continue northward. You'll see that all of those 4 major pipeline systems originate with Canadian supply sources. On slide 10, this is that same map. I quickly just took a screenshot and put it on here for everybody. Just so you got a more complete view of what's in that Minnesota side. So again, those 4 systems color-coded, and then a smaller regional network, the Northern Natural Gas NNG, which is providing, again, deliverability off of largely those systems that you see moving to communities and other ag and industrial customers. On slide 11, what we're looking at, again, is something that we'll talk about here more in a moment. And it's that dynamic between Minnesota and Canada, Minnesota and North Dakota and Canada. So over the last decades, you'll see that the network that has been built out largely to serve growing production at that time in Western Canada, Alberta, moving eastward, and then those laterals, the large transmission systems heading south into the U.S. On slide 12, starts to take a look at the dynamic that we're going to start seeing play out in real time here in the very near future. And that is the development of liquefied natural gas exports out of Canada. That's been a long time coming for that country. They've spent a significant amount of time and resources to get LNG facilities permitted, get the pipeline infrastructure in place. And so here, later this summer, last I'd heard, they've had at least one ship show up. They're starting to get very near deliverability. And so on this graphic, what I'm just trying to say is that the world we've lived in the natural gas dynamics in North America, will start to change very, very soon. And the world that we've lived in for the last 20, 30 years will look different later this year. It's going to look very different 5 years from now. 10 years from now, it could have a completely different viewpoint. And so on this graphic, all I'm attempting to do on the top the top left, the red and the blue lines, just taking a look at how much the U.S. imports at a high level, how much the U.S. exports to Canada. That gray graphic right below it is the net. What's the net imports exports from the U.S. and Canada? Just so we've got kind of some numbers around that. It's around 5 or 6 billion cubic feet per day, BCF per day. On the right-hand side, you start stacking up all of the projects either that are in development or been approved for LNG, and your 6.6 BCF of LNG projects that are on the table for consideration. This was prior to a lot of the recent discussions and rhetoric from leadership up in Canada, looking to potentially further expand new markets out of Canada, looking to further expand opportunities within the nation of Canada. And so these are all things that are going to be changing the landscape in the natural gas world throughout the coming decade. And on that bottom left-hand graphic, I put that horizontal line there to say, okay, what was our net imports, exports from Canada? If all of those projects came into service and no other ones were developed, that largely could eat up all of it. That would assume, though, that Canada going forward is not going to be growing natural gas production, which all indications suggest that we are going to see that. So on slide 13, it's slide 12 on this. I stole this graphic from RBN Energy. They did an event about a month ago. RBN Energy in the oil and natural gas world are cream of the crop, phenomenal energy analysts. And they were looking at this exact question. And so their conclusion, as they looked at kind of left-hand bar graph, they said, okay, in 2025, Canada's producing around a little over 8 BCF a day. They were forecasting about a 50% growth in natural gas over the next 10 years. So assuming an aggressive growth rate, that you'll see that go from 8 up to 12. But the LNG that's coming on, and they did not have that full 6.6 BCF built into this model. I think they were just around 5. But their conclusion was that even with the growth in natural gas production in the country of Canada, that it was going to be insufficient to meet existing deliverabilities into the U.S. as well as that Asian demand that the LNG customers are looking for. And so underneath the map, you'll see the kind of the end conclusion from them. End result, reduction in gas pipeline exports to the U.S. As LNG takes precedence. And at a minimum, commercially, when I think about this for Minnesota, obviously that Emerson Point, if you follow on this map, the purple Viking pipeline system and trace that north, you'll see the red dot. I'll refer to that as Emerson. That's the point where that natural gas enters the U.S. Even commercially, even if volumes weren't impacted, pricing-wise and everything else, you are now going to be in an environment where there's direct competition with LNG markets and what they're willing to pay and what those customers are willing to sign up for. So even the commercial environment, the commercial dynamics we've gotten used to over the last, 40, 50 years will be changing. And that's just the energy market. But that's something we're going to be thinking about. And so when we look at Eastern North Dakota, you'll notice something, and I should have noted it on some of my previous graphics. Western North Dakota and Eastern North Dakota are largely separated. The current infrastructure does not exist to move large volumes of natural gas from Western North Dakota to Eastern North Dakota. So our largest city, Fargo, our third largest city, Grand Forks, are fed by largely Canadian natural gas. That doesn't sit well for a lot of folks in North Dakota when you say we've got this challenge of growing volumes in Western North Dakota. We need to find homes for it. We've got a dynamic where Eastern North Dakota, Western Minnesota is fully reliant on Canadian molecules coming down. Why is there a disconnect there, and how can that be solved? So if we take a look at, let's fast forward for the person running the slide. Let's go to slide 19. So we'll bounce forward through some of these images. And so what we're looking at right now, we found ourselves in an environment that I didn't foresee a year ago, where we were going to have two competing projects to address this exact solution or this exact challenge. And so what we're looking at on this is one of two projects that has been developed. 10 years ago, there was a similar project, but market timing, price collapse, and a similar attempt right before COVID to address this. Also, with the COVID timeframe, shut that system down, or the development of that system down. And so we're back. The company's back here now in 2025 with another attempt at addressing that connection between high volumes in Western North Dakota and demand in the Red River Valley region. And so you'll see in the red, that is the proposed Bakken East pipeline system. And so you can see up on the top right-hand side some of the specs surrounding that, the time frames. I think most now are getting more comfortable with that early 2030 in-service time frames. It seems that customers, the likely folks that are developing either power gen, data, ag processing, whatever customers are behind the support for these types of projects are looking at slightly longer lead times for the reasons that some of the previous speakers noted today as well, just with the long lead times for equipment at those facilities. And so this project, you'll see, originates up in kind of the heart of the Bakken development near Watford City. Thank you. Sorry, I was getting a little echo there for a second. The heart of the Bakken moves eastward, crossing through a number of pipeline systems where interconnects would take place, and then tying in to, it's known as Mapleton, North Dakota, near Castleton. And you'll see an existing blue pipeline then that could connect that Bakken system to the Viking pipeline and provide an alternative source of supply into Viking as an alternative or a supplement to Emerson or Canadian volumes coming south. On slide 20, what we're looking at is a competing project that came forward in the weeks and months following the open season for the WBI project that I was just referring to. And so the Intensity Infrastructure Partners, this is a group out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, looking at that same exact corridor. And for those kind of behind the scenes, it's no mistake that the corridors are very similar. They're competing with each other for potential customers and potential projects along those corridors. And so some open seasons were launched and held for those projects. Each of them, when they came forward, had kind of a proposed, just a starting point of what they were looking at as far as capacity and size. Either one of these systems would be scaled dependent upon customer interest and shipper support. So what the state of North Dakota is doing, so my office, one of the tools that we have is the ability to participate in these pipeline systems as a commercial shipper. So the state of North Dakota could come in as an anchor shipper or a foundational shipper on these systems. We've got the funding and the line of credit and the ability to participate to make sure that one of these two systems gets over the finish line. And so a couple of weeks ago, we put out an RFI to these companies as well as others in case there's something behind the scenes we're not seeing or aware of, basically for information packets that we're looking to get here at the end of June. And then with the target of having a decision to be made on whether the Pipeline Authority and through the Industrial Commission will support one of the two systems and figure out at that point what level of state support might be necessary to move forward. The other piece that I will mention on slide 21, the person running the slides, there might be some animations there. I apologize, but if you want to click through the animations just to get everything set up. One of the other assets that we have in the Williston Basin is that red long oval shape in the southwest corner of this map. And what you're looking at, that is an underground natural gas storage field. And that is North America's single largest underground natural gas storage field. It's in our backyard, and there's also an open season that ended a couple weeks ago to expand access to and from that underground storage facility. The way I compare this for people is that this underground storage asset, it's like an Olympic-sized swimming pool with some drinking straws coming out of it. It's a tremendous underground resource for volume. However, the pipe connectivity in and out of it, the volumes that you can move in the pipeline systems just isn't at the same scale. And that's just commercially, there hasn't been the need for higher volumes in and out on a daily rate. But the owner of that system has been looking to expand access to and from that as part of their Bakken East project. And so for those sitting in the room today, thinking about your assets, thinking about opportunities in your region, we do have this asset in our backyard where it exists today. There are opportunities to expand that natural gas storage. So in the event that seasonal price swings, obviously there's that opportunity. Any type of outages due to weather or supply disruptions or some incident on one of the pipeline networks that's cut off supply, obviously having access to that natural gas storage to keep facilities running 24/7 is critical. On slide 22, this is just that same resource. You'll see up at the top, this is WBI's total working gas storage is about 193 BCF. They're only using around 30 to 50 of that 190. So they've got a tremendous amount of additional space and opportunities, again, to use that seasonal swings as well as some of the supply security issues that we're talking about. So let's pop forward to slide 24. And so how do these projects move forward? As I noted, you've got typical scenarios where you've got supply push, so you've got operators developing oil and gas resources in West North Dakota looking for opportunities to move their resource. You've got marketing firms that are buying and selling natural gas, industrial consumers, power gen. What we're seeing on the two projects that I noted earlier largely is support coming from the industrial. These are a demand-driven opportunity. We're seeing really at a scale we've never seen before. Every other pipeline system that we've largely developed over the last 20 years has been supply push. It's been producers trying to come up with a solution to get a project done. On this side, we're seeing a tremendous amount of interest in new natural gas deliverability to customers along the way. And largely the folks that are going to sign up for these projects are going to be in that bucket. Then you see in green, the state of North Dakota is that other opportunity there that exists, that if there's insufficient amount of near-term commercial interest, the state of North Dakota can come in, take a capacity position. Our intent with any position that we take is to release that capacity as soon as possible. So if the company you represent or work with, if you've got some large natural gas needs in the future, let's say you're 2 years off from FID on that, but a project is moving forward and the state of North Dakota has a chunk of capacity, we could then release that capacity to you at the appropriate time. So again, use this as an invitation for follow-up conversations with me going forward. Then lastly, let's take a look at slide 26. This is how largely that western Minnesota is being supplied today from that Viking system. So there is direct molecules coming from that Emerson Point southward. I've got just the focus here on the North Dakota cities, what that looks like. There are also backhauled paper transport molecules that come out of that Chicago market off the A&R pipeline system that also get delivered to communities in your region. And so the goal then would be having deliverability of North Dakota gas to not only meet the Red River Valley needs, but provide supplemental natural gas deliverability in the Viking so that backhauled molecules can be available for other expansions in Minnesota or growing demand within the region itself. And so with that, I know I'm just watching the clock here. I know we're up against a break, and I don't want to be the speaker to stop that, but I'll stop here. But please, again, for anyone in the audience, I'm going to stick around for the Q&A if that's all right here later this morning. But use this information, again, as an invitation for follow-up conversations. I'd love to dive deeper into all these topics with you and your team going forward. So with that, I'll stop for now, and then I'll look forward to questions here a little bit later.
Very good. Thank you, Justin.